Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who will stay a while and listen.
Okay, there we go. Tim Longo. That was the one I thought you had said in my head last time.
Last time was, I sense a soul in search of answers.
But then both of the characters sound the same when you do them, so...
That's really just compression for VoIP.
Oh, right.
Here in my living room. It's totally different. It's like being there. It's like being in Tristram.
You can switch genders on the fly.
It's a special talent.
Yep.
It's all ones and zeros here in programming land.
Right, of course. That's all you need to make.
Sorry, I hope that wasn't too graphic a joke for people.
Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh! I hope this.
Anyway, just roll right on past that one. Don't think about it too much. Right, so we're playing Diablo, and you're hearing both my Deckard Cain and my Adria impressions, which are spot on, like I said here. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about that we didn't get around to last time was the overall tone of this game, which is extremely dark and brooding, and I guess you'd say gothic, maybe. Melodramatic.
And
little bit of a departure for them compared to Warcraft, which has more of a humorous personality, even though they're fighting this unending war between orcs and humans or whatever.
Yeah, it's and there's also this underpinning of heaven versus hell and some sort of inspired sort of, I don't know, biblical side of things in a way or something like that. It's funny. I don't know if you remember when Diablo 3 came out, sort of some of the controversy about the rainbows. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and Blizzard ended up making t-shirts about it, kind of embracing it in a way, or kind of making fun of the sort of the trolling that the community was doing, or what have you, and lighthearted fun, and I think that tone, and like you said, the difference between the other Blizzard games ended up being one of its secret weapons of the time, and I think it worked for Doom as well. And kind of ratcheting that up, and other games of the era like Duke Nukem and stuff did their own weird version, not great version of being quote unquote adult.
One that doesn't hold up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and still attempts today don't hold up. But it was definitely something that the fan base of the game that was created after this game came out was latching onto, and that's that tone. And I did restart, as I think I talked about last episode, and so I played through the Butcher again, of course, and I actually stopped and sort of analyzed that room a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that that exemplifies this sort of how far they were going, and with the lower fidelity, they could get away with more, of course, but there's definitely some rough stuff in that room happening.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's funny because I watched, I didn't quite get all the way through the GDC postmortem from a couple of years back that Aaron Evers had sent in.
Yeah.
But I did get through the part where he talks about how the colors were chosen or used, basically. And I think that's really telling and interesting in a way. So they used a 256 color palette, very common at the time, right? 8-bit palette. And they, excuse me, they had 128 colors that they used for the backgrounds, the environment, and 128 for the characters and props, foreground stuff, basically. And one of the things I think that allowed them to achieve, and basically they used strips of colors, which were like, I guess, different luminance values for the same color. So, going full black for any given color through like a red and then paling out to a more white, right? Very light red. They I think that limitation actually helped them because they could choose their background and foreground palettes in such a way that the characters would stand out enough.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the problem in when you have 32-bit color and dramatic lighting models and what have you, it makes it much harder for the characters to stand out, especially if you want to have lots of different armor sets and like all these customization options. It makes it harder for those characters to stand out against the background unless you do some dramatic things. And I think that's actually kind of what happened there. Is they were trying to find ways to make the gameplay stuff very readable, as well as have a lot of variety of backgrounds. And that meant that they didn't have that sort of fixed palette that the background was going to be, right? And the fixed palette that the foreground was going to be when they looked at Diablo 3. And I think that was maybe at the root of that problem. Like, I mean, you try to do a lot of that with art design, or art direction, but that's what they were doing, right? Is they're choosing lighter palettes for the character stuff so that it definitely stands out against the background. Where they ended up, I think is fine. I mean, it works for me. This is not really a game about a discussion about Diablo 3, but I do think it's interesting how those constraints could really help them.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to try to watch. That was Dave Brevik.
Yes, it was. Yep.
Yeah. So I need to watch that before we're done. And the thing that really along those lines a little bit, it's awesome point about the constraints, and I'll react to your Diablo 3 point in a second. But the thing that struck me when I loaded the game back up that was somewhere in my subconscious really was the color palettes. And the way the color choices that they did choose within the limited amount that they had, because there's this sort of, especially in the environments, there's this sort of desaturation that of the time wasn't, I just think they did a great job with what they had. It wasn't very common because games were still, and I think we've probably talked about it throughout various other series we've done of this around this sort of decade. The common trope was in games was to be more vibrant and to be more on the nose and obvious with color choices. And this was because of the tone choices that they were making of kind of trying to make a more mature RPG, whatever. It kind of put it in its own, in a kind of a class by itself. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And
the Sin War is not all puppies and rainbows.
No, quite the opposite. And by the way, if you haven't yet, you need to check out the manual, which I did finally look at.
Oh, I'll have to track it down. I have a boxed copy somewhere. So,
yeah, I just found the PDF online, and I wanted to check out some spell descriptions because they don't have any tooltips for that stuff. Now that I'm getting a bigger set of spells, and so I wanted to look that up. But the reason I brought it up is probably the last quarter of the entire manual is just lore. It's this just long.
I remember that
description of the sin, like the Sin War, and like all the characters and the world, and so they definitely had the passion for it. And to your point, it was contrasting other Blizzard properties. And the other thing, to come back full circle to the Diablo 3 stuff, if you look at the character now, this may be controversial for those diehards who did revolt sort of a little bit against this, but in Diablo 3, though they did, it is still darker than say WoW or something by a long shot, and there is definitely some of those same color tones that they, as you appropriately put it, are art directing toward, right? Because they don't have constraints. But if you look at the character designs and even the animation style and a lot of things, it still feels very Blizzard versus this original game and even Diablo 2 that felt like in a class of its own. Like they are starting to blur more. And an example being, Diablo characters are sitting very appropriately next to other characters in the Blizzard, canon in something like Heroes of the Storm. And they definitely exaggerate them more, but they also didn't have to exaggerate them that much, so they are blending together more. I think the hardcore fans of the original, really Diablo 2 was what, the hardcore fan base was what who we're talking about. I think there was some credence in what they were saying as far as the shift, but I like it, and I think it still was successful, and it's been a relatively successful game generally, so it's still fine. But now that I've gone back to this original game, I do see the differences starting. You know what I mean? Having played a fair amount of 3 myself.
You see more of the unification of art style across the properties, really.
It's like Disney, like Blizzard is starting to have their own sort of version of that, right? Where they have a sort of StarCraft, Warcraft, Overwatch, and and they all have their own, I don't know, 20% spin on each of their own categories. Overwatch has a little bit of its 20% unique Overwatchness, but still very much a Blizzard feeling game, and I think that's a good thing. But it does mean the differences you saw between Warcraft, which we played on the podcast, and Diablo 1, you're not going to see as great a difference in that regard. I don't know, maybe a future Diablo will surprise us and they go super hardcore on that, but there's at least enough of that percentage difference to make it a different property that people like. There's Diablo fans that like Diablo a lot and don't like WoW or whatever. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the tone, I just forgot how self-serious and gothic and just over the top it really was, especially when I looked at the manual. There's also a bunch of sketches of demons and pentagrams and, it's probably Metzen and Samwise's artwork. And they're just, it's very specific.
Yeah. I do remember that about the manual, about there being a huge lore thing in it, to set the tone. And when we talked, listeners who haven't heard it can go back and track down the Bill Roper interview. He did talk about how they would stuff the box, the box that went on the shelf with stuff to make it heavier, to make it feel like you're really getting something when you got a Blizzard game.
I forgot about that.
And I think part of that is the manual. Like, you don't need that stuff. And this is kind of at the end of that time that you put all that stuff in. I mean, by the time we shipped Starfighter, the manual was pretty thin. And we were moving to a time where all tutorialization was in the game. No one was going to read the manual. So by the time we left LucasArts, there were basically no expectation that anyone was going to read the manual.
Yeah.
Although we were on the console, so that's a little different as well. But I think the point stands. It was happening in the PC space at that time as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's, the to add into the tone stuff a little bit, and again, to make the comparison with Doom, the other thing that I'm reminded by playing this game, and we got, actually, I guess I'll take that back. We got a little bit of this from Fallout, which was also in that sort of like over the top, right? RPG with gore and stuff. But all the enemy deaths, especially the goat people, are super, super sloppy and great audio and just very grotesque. And they definitely lean into that a lot, just like Doom did, just like Fallout did with their, blowing people apart and stuff. So it was just this titillation that was happening, and still unfortunately happens too much in the industry about that whole thing. But it was like pushing the boundaries, right? And that's where I think some of the skeptics of the medium come from, right?
Yeah. I mean, didn't you work on a Tomb Raider game?
Okay. Yep. Fair point. Fair point. Yep.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, but there is something also just overwrought about the writing, which I think it's really interesting because there's very little questy stuff.
Well, you used melodrama earlier, right? I think
right. And I think actually that makes that makes it all feel kind of okay that there's not a lot of side stuff, because it's one of the complaints you often have about, for example, an open world game is, well, I've got this main storyline. Supposedly I'm supposed to kill this elder dragon who's come back from whatever, but I'm just off, picking cabbages. And then I found some mine. And there's no urgency to that main quest. And here they've kind of pared down to like, there's really just the one quest, and then there's some stuff that you do along the way, but it's not really side questy. I think the one exception maybe is that dark passage or whatever that takes you to the fouled water, which I don't know if you even had.
I did. I finally did that on my second.
Oh, you did find that. Okay.
Yeah, I did find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then here in the Catacombs, there's just some set in stuff where it's like, oh, if you go past the halls of bone, you'll get to the such and such. I haven't found that set of armor either. I don't know if you did. Valor.
I don't know what you are talking about.
Okay. Oh, you may not get that quest as a sorcerer. So I'm not sure.
I have the Hall of Bones or the Room of Bones or whatever still a quest, and I've seen the rooms on certain levels that I can't access. I guess I'm a little confused on what to do with that quest right now. I got down to level, I got down to level 9 essentially, and then stopped. But I still have that quest, and I have another one that's something about the blind.
Which I don't have.
Did you find a book that there was this very gothic poem being read? No?
No.
I didn't remember this one. It caught me off guard because it's obviously a very Diablo poem. A 4 and blah, 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 So anyway, but I actually...
You should hear my Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, all right, fine. Yeah, maybe that wasn't a good reference. I should have charged the lights.
7 minutes ago.
Okay, it's pretty good. That's your Deckard Cain doing Abraham Lincoln.
I'm doing
real treat.
Deckard Cain after watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure doing Abe Lincoln.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to see that Photoshop with combining those three things. I don't even know if I can parse that. Is Deckard Cain in the movie? And then he has a
no, but Abe Lincoln is obviously,
and he's wearing Deckard Cain's robe.
Now we're off topic, anyway, but let's we can actually use the robe. We can segue into loot.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, I'm stuck on those quests, and I don't understand the structure of it. Did you do the Hall of Bones one?
I went through the Hall of Bones and got to the place beyond.
Is it inaccessible until?
No, there's a couple switches that you can throw, and there's
switches.
Rooms. Yeah, so maybe you missed the switches.
Yeah, the pixel hunting aspect of this is something I do remember being frustrated by originally.
These are pretty big switches, Tim. They're like a size of a character.
Okay, well,
there's basically moving east to west, which is kind of weird because there's no east to west, but because it's isometric. But but isometric east to west. There are 2 halls all around that main room. And at the end of those halls are 2 switches, and they open to rooms to, I guess, isometric north.
Missed them.
Which is more or less northeast.
I missed the opening to the originally
the passage as well. Yeah, so you're just missing a few things, and that's fine.
But again,
what resolution are you playing at?
I don't even know. I just whatever it defaulted to.
Well, that's probably part of the problem.
Yeah, no, I kind of wanted to play as close to the original as I could. I didn't even install the patch. I didn't need to. But anyway, it's working. But so loot, I guess. Yeah, we segued there too. I mean, there's sort of a few points. We have a secondary topic when it comes to multiplayer and single player, which we can hit after this. But the main thing I wanted to make sure that we talk about now that we're 2 episodes in. This is the first game, we're talking in pre-show, Brett was kind of confirming this. This is the first game we've had with procedural loot, even though it is a main, it's a staple of the industry at this point, right? Very, very common and very proven as a way to incentivize and drive players. motivations.
Right. Procedural loot in the sense that the objects themselves are generated rather than the contents of chests, for example, which would not have been new. We mean loot, not the sense that you're looking at the loot on a table, but that you're building some new thing that in theory maybe only you ever got. Not likely, because I don't think the tables are that big, but there's a large number of possible items that you can generate from just a handful of descriptors, and random rolls.
Right, and but also combining that with I guess random loot, at least in multiplayer, random loot in chests, right? Based on
right. No, it's both.
So,
I just mean that prior to now, there certainly would have been games where you opened a chest and you got different loot in different games.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I see.
But it was just like oh, you got a sword +1 versus a rapier +1, or what, you know, instead of a mace of the moon +9 to magic or whatever.
Yeah, right. With properties, no, that's a good distinction. Yeah, no, and I'm really mainly talking about the former in that regard. That I'm talking about the procedural loot items themselves, and then you combine that with the random chance, and to the degree where once this game had come out, and we still do it sometimes today, we will describe procedural loot like that as Diablo loot. You know what I mean? It's become a descriptor for this kind of design because now again, I'm sure there was probably some specific earlier game that we didn't track the legacy of, or that we don't know about, that did some of that where maybe they got the idea for it. But often, you know, the one who wins is the one who gets the credit for innovation, to be honest, unfortunately. So anyway, long story short, that was a game changer for a lot of things. And as we know, it's even bled into any kind of game with any slight amount of RPG element, right? You have even your Destinies today or what have you, and now we have the looter shooter, term that has progressed from really Diablo's popularity in that loot system. Obviously, one of the ultimate examples is Borderlands, when it comes to how many millions of combinations they boasted when it comes to their loot. And it's all property, procedural systemic based properties that are multiplied, through that loot table. And Brett would know better about how that's done. And in Diablo's case, the specific additional thing I wanted to add in is they do that even with the store. And so every time you visit the store, even within a session, things will change up on you. To the degree where I took this picture of one of my visits early in the game, and there were two sets of leather armor completely identical with completely the same cost, but one was 12 armor and one was 10 armor, and they were literally right next to each other.
So that's hilarious.
Like, well, that's definitely systemic.
Yeah.
So
that's it's funny. Now, so now you mentioned that, it sort of makes me think about Blizzard and the way they refine these things over time. And this is a different system, but one of the things they do is for random drops, when you get to World of Warcraft, is they increase the chances of the random drop for the quest items that you need.
Right. Yeah. I think
the further you go. Right. And I think it's things like that where they would have probably said, oh, let's classify the sorts of things that you get so that doesn't happen. Like Diablo 2 may not have that. That unhappy circumstance. I'm sure they refine
the rule set for that stuff as they go, for sure, right? Based on your class, based on what's happening. They obviously, in this game, they do it based on your level, because they want, the store to be outfitted with things that are more appropriate for what you need, of course, right? So they did a little bit of that there, but yeah, you can tell that system gets way more refined as the games go on, specifically, for sure. And that's all over WoW today as well, with all the different difficulties of a raid, say, right? And it's all scaled up, and it's all magical math stuff going on, which,
right.
Yeah. But it really, the underpinnings of that started in this game. And when we're playing, I mean, Brett said he started playing a multiplayer character, and we hope to kind of delve into that maybe even together down the road if we can figure that out. And there are differences between the two, but in multiplayer specifically, when it comes to this sort of the way that the procedural loot system drove the obsession with this game. People playing, and myself included, a lot of us have stories when it came out, because most of us were either, a lot of the people that I played with were already in development at Lucas and stuff, sinking hours and hours because you want that, it's that endorphin rush of that. What am I going to get? Because it's random, and because of, and you're just kind of constantly playing to just unearth that stuff. And mechanically, not a lot is changing once you're 20 hours into the game or whatever. But that loot system alone drove people to keep playing, and that obsession with it. And that's why it's become such an evergreen system that everyone uses now, because it's a proven way to motivate people, for better or for worse, right? There's lots of discourse around the pros and cons of that, but it is hard to refute, that it works the way that it does, so.
And they ladder, that chasing of the loot basically allows them to ladder you to play. First I'll play it normal, then I'll play it hardcore, then I'll play it nightmare or whatever. I'll just keep playing it on a harder difficulty because the loot will keep getting better. And they've extended that to a ridiculous degree with Diablo 3, right? So, and they've just, now it's just keep playing forever, right? I mean, because they'll just keep upping that. And I gather they do some stuff with downloadable free downloadable content, I guess, to like just keep updating, like, oh, if you want to keep going. And they've found, maybe when we do some bonus episode stuff, you'll see, because you haven't played Diablo 3, have you? Oh, I have, yeah. I played it through on the PS4. Yeah.
Well, on I don't know if they do this on the console, but they have these essentially procedural dungeons now that take the world and do the same thing with it. So to your point about like endless, never ending content, like they've found ways for it to, it's not even that you're even playing the campaign over and over again on harder and harder difficulties. They have a whole just sort of, mixing, mashup of all their different systems that they create these completely procedural situations that force you to go through, and they put challenges on that. And so, they've essentially, exploded this concept that they really have with both the procedural dungeons they have in this game and the procedural loot. They've exploded that into every system. So it's really just, it's just blown up in as far as the opportunity for a player to keep playing. And of course, the argument then at that point comes down to, it really just ends up being boiled down to the systems and mechanics of that. You're no longer getting any kind of curated or guided, experience, because you're just playing it in its purest procedural form. So you have the context of the world and the tone and the characters and stuff, but there's no story, there's no quest, there's no, it's just pure gameplay. And so, that's for some people and not for others, but it does work for a lot of people. So, but the underpinnings are in this game. But anyway, that's what I think I hit everything on procedural loot stuff, and we'll get. I'm sure it'll come up from time to time as we go through. I did have one particular question.
Well, I also had a thing about the store as far as loot goes.
Yeah.
Have you yet gotten to the point where you go, you know what, I'm going to buy a couple of these things in the store even though I don't want them, just to see what else I'll get?
Oh no, I haven't done that. To reseed the store.
To reseed, because it'll always have whatever 7 items or something like that. And so if you buy one, there'll just be another item. So what you do is you buy a couple of cheap ones that you don't want, and you get something else.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I forgot about that technique. I haven't really purchased much, to be honest. I tend to be, with procedural loot games like this, I tend to not use the store very much, and I just kind of see what the loot drops are going to give me, and I kind of adapt around it.
Yeah.
To be honest. So but
I will say that I feel like the multiplayer loot system is a little bit more rewarding.
Could be.
And for one thing, you're chasing after it with everybody everybody wants to try and grab the thing that just dropped. So there's kind of a fighting over over whatever drops.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, I mean, I guess maybe it was just the laddering up of difficulty and just continuing to play that it felt like there was better loot in multiplayer. But it might also be that I mostly played multiplayer as well. So I just don't really remember because it's been so long. But yeah, that might be part of it for me.
They could. Then you, I wanted to ask a quick side question before I forget. When you started your other characters,
Mm-hmm.
did you notice? Did it feel like the game reacted to restarting at all, or did it feel pretty much the same from a difficulty perspective?
No, it didn't feel different to me. Okay. No.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my imagination. It must be because I started over because I had that spellbook problem I mentioned last time, which ended up being a good idea.
Did you start a whole new character?
It's a whole new character.
Okay.
Because I'm playing on single player, right? My world was already seeded, and there was no way for me to really farm those books that I sold. So I just decided to start over. It was early enough. But when I started the exact same sorcerer character over again, this one's named Brett II. It felt like things had ratcheted up a bit for me. So it was probably my imagination, but they definitely do some of that stuff, but not in this regard, probably. But I'm back on the loot thing. Have you gotten? There is nothing like seeing a gold item drop. Like
there is nothing like it.
That feeling. Not even just this, it's all parts of it. The sounds that they have for like rings dropping or, really good metal things dropping, that really, really good hefty sound. And then hovering over it and seeing the gold / yellow text is just, it's in my psyche that I cannot ever unsee it, and Blizzard, basically pioneered the coloration of loot from, I think people don't think about this very much, but like the green, blue, purple, gold strata of classification for loot value came from Diablo. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
everybody adopted that after that. It's just a thing. And
I mean, this is a prime game to steal from. There's a lot of good stuff here. And even Blizzard steals from themselves in it.
That's
right?
what WoW adopted as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. WoW adopts it, but also they steal the same sort of thing to do the same thing with the monsters, right? The mobs or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you're walking around, it's like, or even other players, like, oh, this guy's a little bit above me, it's different color, or they're a little bit below me. The quests and all that stuff all similarly get colored to sort of indicate how much experience points you'll get for it, or how difficult it will be to kill, or what have you. And so they even take that sort of like that sort of loot value coloration thing that they do, and they adopt that to also use it in all other sorts of ways.
Common lexicon for everybody.
Yeah.
So have you had any drop randomly other than like,
I think I had one drop, but I think it was a saber, and it was for my Amazon character. So I couldn't use it. So I just identified it, promptly forgot what it was, and sold it.
Yeah.
So there's always that risk as well, which again, something we've talked about is that they probably refined that away in Diablo 2, especially in single player.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the single player one's a little bit weird for sure, because you'd want to curate that a little bit for the player, so it feels better that way. I got to the point though, I had a mace drop, somebody's such and such as star, kind of a morning star kind of thing, and it was good enough for me that I actually increased my strength so I could use it, even as a sorcerer. I was just like, this is a rare item. This is a unique item. I love that it dropped, even though it's not perfect for me. I'm going to try to fool around with it anyway. I did have a staff drop as well. And then what's cool about the Butcher's Quest is when you kill him, he drops his legendary Cleaver. So even if you haven't had one drop, you get that experience. Everyone who has the Butcher's Quest, which before last episode I thought would be everybody, but apparently it's not. Everyone will have that feeling of killing this boss and having this gold item drop, and having it have a special attributes, and having the stats come up on the left side, which no other weapons do that, or no other items do that. So, at least you have that little bit of a taste. So then not long after replaying the Butcher, I had that Morningstar drop, and it's just this feeling where you're just like, oh my gosh, it just came out of a random chest,
Yeah.
and it's just unreal, and it's so silly, and it's so and it's probably why I still play WoW as well, for that same sort of feeling. But yeah, so
That's interesting. Well, someday when we play WoW, because that's not why I played WoW, really.
Not the only reason. Don't get me wrong.
No, I know. But for me, it's like, I don't know. It's not even the primary reason, I don't think. But it's been a while since I played WoW. So,
well, the problem, a whole nother topic, but we'll talk about that. I mean, it's more of a long game in that case. So, so it's not really as quick gratification as this game is. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, you haven't had any drop that are appropriate for your class?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you do get one in town as well, I believe. The Ring of Truth.
2 rings, actually. I got
two rings, right? Yeah. 2 rings. I forget what the other one's named. But one ups your attributes and resistances and things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember.
One has a light radius on it. It's
one has a light radius. Yeah.
It's like a gemstone name or something. I forget how to say it, but yeah. So that's another one. It's like you hear that ring again. That ring drop sound.
It's like an amethyst ring or something like that.
Yeah. Man, that ring drop sound is just etched in my
brain.
Oh,
that's the one. Ching.
So beautiful.
I love it. That one I do. That is the one that I'm like, I think I just heard a ring drop. I think I even did it on stream this past weekend. Where is it? My precious.
Right.
So,
I did have another
around in the dark.
Oh yeah, exactly. I had another topic I didn't mention in pre-show, but before I hit that, did we hit the ones that we listed already?
We hit most of them. We haven't talked about single player versus multiplayer, but we might actually push that till we've played some multiplayer together. And we also want to talk about the music at some point.
Yeah. Well, really quick, and I think this one can be quick, but it is an important one for me because of my character. The one, and are you still playing all 3 classes?
I am, yes.
Okay, so you're able to compare them. I haven't done the research on this, but one interesting thing about playing the sorcerer that, as I said, I'm intentionally playing the sorcerer because it's outside of my wheelhouse and it's not what I normally would pick. So it seems more interesting for the podcast for me. But one thing that I'm finding curious, as opposed to, well, I guess with the rogue, it would do similar stuff and change over time. But because the way it seems like to me that you need to succeed with the sorcerer is that you're ideally changing as much as you can. You're changing your spell types up based on the enemy types. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to like the warrior or what have you, you're doing a lot more direct damage with your sword or what have you, and sort of it evens out. Like, yes, there probably will be some at some point that will have resistances to things enough to where I guess it would. I don't know if there are like flaming swords, but you might want a flaming sword in certain cases because of the damage it's doing. But in a sorcerer's case, I'm starting to get to the point where if I'm not using like a holy bolt against undead, it's really inefficient for me to use anything else because they're really like their resistances are built up in such a way. But when you're playing as a warrior, a sword hits everything, so. Yep. It's starting to feel a little like it's cool that I'm doing this. It's kind of interesting to do that spell swapping, but it feels a little unfair. You know what I mean? Because once you get that badass sword, it can really, you can succeed against most things, I assume. I haven't played the warrior in a long time, but for me, I feel at a disadvantage, and it's also cumbersome to switch spells. So I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I'm kind of having to swap around based on what the enemies are, and they mix the enemies up a lot, the enemy types. So it's like,
well, so there's 2 things. Is that I think, well, one, I the multiplayer character I started was sorcerer, and I was doing the same thing where I was, and he ended up dying a couple of levels in, I was like, oh, I guess I'll start a new game just with nothing. And I did, and I just kept playing the same character. So I've had that experience already. Like, I'm not going to go down to get what's on that corpse. I'll just start over. Same character, right? So not really starting over. But and then I was doing the same thing. I had a staff of Holy Bolt, which had like 80 charges, which was a lot. I was like, oh, that's a lot. And then Firebolt. The difference, I think, with the warrior playing alone is that you're very susceptible to ranged attacks if you're also having to deal with close-in stuff. So you're going to take a ton of damage from skeleton archers or whatever. And that's the balancing choice that they've made there, is that, sure, you've got some more management as a mage, but you can pick out what those things are from far away and deal with them in an order that you choose that makes sense. Whereas I have one order. Whatever's next to me is what I can kill. Yeah. And then I've got to try to get there as quickly as I can. And of course the balance that they make there is that I'm also a tank, right? I can take a fair amount of damage. So it's not, that they make that trade-off as well for you. It's like, well, okay, now, but you really have to do that. Make sure you manage that really closely, because you can't take a lot of damage. So there are those sorts of balancing trade-offs, I think, that make sense. But I do think, they're presented as warrior then rogue then sorcerer, and I think those are basically an order of difficulty.
Yeah, it's more advanced. Yeah, and going my memory going all the way back to the first series we did with System Shock 2, it was a similar, because
you played the psychic, right?
I focus on psychic, which I never do, and it's essentially sort of spellcaster, right? And most of the game was very difficult for me, but the last quarter of the game I was a god, Yeah. And so I'm assuming that'll be some of that going on with this character potentially. So yeah, it's just an interesting observation I was having about playing this character versus others, that in my memory at least. Another quick one that I forgot that I'll just really quickly bang out is a quick mention on the decoupling of classes, which a lot of RPGs did back in the day, decoupling of items being associated with classes versus attributes being the prerequisites. And the reason I bring that up is when I got that Morning Star, I had the option of, even as a sorcerer, which is not intended for me, I did have the option to, increase my strength to use an item that wasn't necessarily for me. And that's my prerogative. So you kind of can sub-spec yourself. Even if as a sorcerer, you could be a battle mage, or, you could be a sorcerer that loves bows or something, right? And the system is flexible enough because they don't tell you who can use what. They just tell you what your attributes need to be. And so it definitely gets weird if a sorcerer who ups their strength, a lot. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's a limit to that probably from a balancing perspective. But I always appreciated that pretty elegant solution to, okay, we're a game about random loot. And so a sorcerer, you never know what the sorcerer is going to get. They might get what they get. And then we need to build a system to allow flexibility versus, the sorcerer is getting things that say, only warriors can use this stuff. And then, of course, they're just going to sell it, So,
right.
Quick mention
yeah, and similarly, magic is accessible to all. You can pick up those books and learn them if you want to invest your leveling up points into magic as your skill, or whatever the skill is. I think it's magic, right? And if you want to dump your points in there, you can go ahead and do that. Same with bows, although bows are rely on both strength and dexterity, I think, as you go further. It's kind of mostly dexterity, but occasionally the strength floor will rise again 5 points. So you have to spend a level where you just level up your strength as you get to battle bows and what have you. And yeah, so you're making those sorts of same decisions. It's kind of interesting because they went away from that to some degree with the skill tree in Diablo 2. And I think Diablo 3, which is a lot more hard and fast, although it does open up more opportunities for style of play, right? You have, I guess, 5 basic characters in Diablo 2, and then 2 or even maybe 3 skill trees for each. I don't remember how much it branches, but you have different builds you can make.
Yeah, I think it was 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember 3, but I never. I'm
Well,
not. I'm not going to claim that my memory is good enough to be entirely clear on that.
But also in 3, though I haven't played recently, they do change it from time to time. In 3, you can respec very easily. So even if you
Right.
commit to a certain, and you find that crazy, with 2 and 3, it becomes a lot about finding sets of gear, which is like that's the real chase for people. But if you find a set that that you really built up, and you can respec toward the items you found, so it's not permanent. But yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting evolution of the systems.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, music. We can maybe hit that real quick too.
Sure. Yeah, the strains of the town theme are that was the thing that pulled me right back in. Just hearing, I was like, "Oh my god!" Like I totally forget. If you had asked me about Diablo, I would have said, "Oh yeah, click fest, great loot. Go down the 16 levels. That crazy ending." And I would not have even thought to mention.
No.
And then as soon as I was playing it, I don't remember things like that. It's very rare.
Yeah, for me, it's totally the music.
Yeah. But no, as soon as I heard it, I was like, "Oh my god, can't believe I forgot the music."
The dumb anecdote that I have with the music that has happened to me multiple times in my personal experience in my career. When you have I don't know, you always hear stories, or I've known some people who are music students who are learning guitar for the first time, and everyone learns Freebird or something like that, right? And they're like, or Stairway to Heaven. It's like, oh yeah, I'm learning the guitar. I'm going to play a classic tune that everyone's going to remember. Well, for geeks, game geeks who are learning the guitar, I've had 5 different people who are learning the guitar, and the first song they learn is the Diablo song, and they start playing, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, the Diablo song." It's just it's like the Halo song. It's one of our, in my opinion, it's one of our, from a musical standpoint, it's one of our Star Wars or Indiana Jones equivalents. It's just it just makes people, for anyone who played the game, especially back in the day, and they've kept this theme throughout 2 and 3 as well, modern versions. But it transports people back to a very specific, because it was such a unique tone, and we talked about tone up top. The music is very much a part of that tone for me.
Yeah, it's very forlorn. It's not necessarily dark in the town, but it's meant to be. It's pastoral, but also melancholy.
Yeah. But it's sort of like the remember the music in Resident Evil in the save rooms. As soon as you get into one of the rooms, you're safe.
Right.
So it's got an emotional sort of hook to it. But as you go deeper and into the dungeons, it does get creepier and harsher, and just finally getting to the catacombs, I would say, they had sort of some sort of crying kind of, or screaming.
Yes, as I said on the stream, it was making me lactate.
Okay. Well, okay. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry I missed it.
That baby crying sound. It is so piercing, though.
Yeah. It's just it's just hilarious. It's again another example for why people, I think, latched onto it, because it's kind of a bold direction to go in. It was very much of its time for sure, but but it's just that town scene, or that town music specifically, is just ingrained. It felt like coming. I know it's super cheesy to say this, but as soon as we loaded it up, and I actually anticipated this because I do remember the music. It felt like coming home or something. It felt like that long lost game just like a warm blanket you're just coming right back into.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like I said, I had totally forgotten it, and I don't remember if it's the same music in Diablo 2. No idea. That's one of the things I don't tend to remember, except for a few sort of iconic ones. Actually, Halo's one that I do remember. I mean, but that's because it's the best locker room showers song of all time. So, because of the echo.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is.
I sent you that clip last year of Brock Holt of the Red Sox singing it in the.
Yeah, someone caught it. Yeah.
Yeah, in the Fenway showers or something. Yeah, that's pretty good. You get that reverb. It sounds like there's more than one of you.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good. All right. Anything else you want to hit before we turn to feedback?
No, I think that covers it. We have more things will come, and I think some of my notes, even from both the first two episodes, I'll keep coming back to some of the stuff as we start finishing off. But yeah, it's getting harsher. I just dabbled in level 9 a little bit as I was finishing up,
I was trying to find the stairs up to Tristram.
Yeah.
But it wasn't near enough, and I just went back up to level 8 and saved.
It's rough. Yeah, that definitely.
Yeah, it gets a lot tougher, a lot faster.
I am starting to worry a little bit about my abilities as a sorcerer. So yeah, I purchased one. I've only purchased one book. I found all the rest of the books, and I'm bummed because I had to start over because the books that had dropped in my previous seed, I was actually, I think, maybe better than what I found the second run. But it definitely was a good choice to go back because my spells are way higher level than they would have been normally. So I made a good call, but I bought this spell called Elemental. And I thought it was going to summon an elemental to come around with me like the golem spell, which the golem spell is awesome because that golem, he trundles around and does major damage.
Oh, and you have the Hydra spell as well, right?
Hydra?
I forget what it's called, but it's the 3-headed thing that you can...
Oh, you summon something?
Yeah, you didn't get... Oh, because you didn't do the thing in the Beyond the Halls of Bone.
No, I haven't done that yet. Yeah, I got to go back up and find those.
You got to go back and do that because you get a spell in there that plants basically a turret.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah. Well, the golem's good. I've had the golem just go in and fight bosses for me and win. So I thought the elemental was going to be that, but it turned out it doesn't work that way.
That's Tim right there.
Well, when I'm a fragile sorcerer,
I'm going to let my golem have the fun. I'll be out here watching him have the fun.
Yeah, well, joke's on them. Anyway.
Really? It's on them, is it? Okay. All right. Let's just roll straight into email. We have a few emails. We didn't have any reviews this week. We'd love to get those via the sort of Apple infrastructure that helps us reach new listeners. But we also accept email at devgameclub@gmail.com. I'm actually going to go first because we had one come in right under the wire before recording tonight. So I'll do the first and third mails tonight. This one is subject Diablo Part 1 from Lee Davey. Lee says, "Hi guys, listening to Diablo Part 1. One thing I haven't heard yet, and it may show up, is the similarities to Ultima 8. Ultima 8 switched to an isometric view, switched the series to a real-time combat system, and moved Ultima to single player. Ultima 8 didn't have the same excellent execution, though. Clunky inventory, jump puzzles, slow action, etc. Love the podcast, Lee." I actually replied to Lee, and I'm pretty sure it's true of you, but I actually, is Ultima 8, I got off that ride at Ultima 7. I never played 8 or 9. I didn't know what your experience was.
No, same. Yeah, I got off, I think, earlier than 7.
Yeah. I played 1 through 4, 6, and 7. I never played 5.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
And yeah. I mean, often we're like, well, this is the one we remember. This certainly is the one that popularized it.
Well, that was we did I made a reference earlier in this episode to it, but we did we did a roundtable one time at Crystal Dynamics where we kind of were talking about innovation. It was just an internal thing, but it was similar to a GDC roundtable where we were talking about what innovation is. And my reference to innovation is credited to the one that wins was very specific. And again, the other sort of ultimate example that we often use is active reload in Gears, or cover-based shooting in Gears. Active reload actually was obviously specifically there, but cover shooting, Gears gets a lot of credit for. But what was the name of that? Kill Switch was actually the first game to do cover-based shooting, I believe, and it was before Gears. And in fact, I believe Cliff cited that game as an inspiration, as he did with RE4. However, nobody knows Kill Switch. Nobody remembers Kill Switch, right? It's just like Gears was the one that polished it, made it great. And so not necessarily defending that, that Diablo really owes it, or, that owns it, but because it was the one that popularized it, like you said, often, that's where the credit goes, unfortunately. But I'm sure, and like I said in the first episode, even I think there's some gauntlet in here, that can't be under appreciated. So, but I didn't play that one.
Yeah, I mean this is a solid 2.5 years after Ultimate 8. Ultimate 8 was March of '94, and this, as we looked up, was the last day of 1996. So for most people, it was 97. So a good 2.5 years later. Yeah. I wonder if had Ultimate 8 been, well, either not been what it was in terms of being real time, or had been a better implementation, if we would have seen something like Diablo a little bit earlier. Maybe not a lot earlier, because not a lot of time there, but games are made a lot more quickly then. Maybe there would have been an opportunity to have somebody jump on that sooner. Either way, if Ultimate 8 stayed with the Ultimate 7's model, or if Ultimate 8 were just a better implementation of it. Maybe Ultimate 8 would have been the one we were looking back on, and playing that for the series instead. If it had been a better implementation.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, thanks for pointing that out, Lee. We do not expect to be exhaustive here. We have not played everything. And in that case, I do remember Ultimate 8 being fairly savaged in the reviews because it was such a departure. And for some other stuff, there's some, jump puzzles that he mentions. I remember getting a lot of wrath from the RPG diehards. I sent one over to you, sir.
Yeah. So subject is Diablo thoughts from Raymond. Hi, just a random assortment of Diablo thoughts. Tim mentioning there seemingly being pauses in combat reminded me that Diablo was turn-based at first. Dave Brevik talking about it here, and he had a link in the show notes. Brett will put, okay, never mind, I won't write that.
No, it's fine. The link was in the show notes last week, but I'll put it back in the show notes again this week so people can track that down.
Is that the GDC talk you mean?
No, this is, I think this was an IGN talk. Okay, yeah. An interview he did somewhere else, but
and I think we mentioned
again. Thanks to Aaron for sending those in.
And it'd be interesting, to know what the sort of inspirations for Blizzard to kind of push it to become real time, where that came from. He goes on. Moving forward after madly clicking on an enemy is why I usually hold down shift to stay stationary whenever I start attacking enemies, especially for ranged classes. That is true, though. Does that work?
I do that when I play the Amazon, or the Rogue, rather.
I couldn't remember if that started with 2 or 1. I haven't done.
No, you can do it in 1. Yeah.
No, totally good tip. I totally did the same because I almost always played ranged classes in the Diablo game. I usually played warrior, but with a bit of spell casting, mainly to get an edge on Leoric. I miss the flexibility of 1, but also like more defined classes. I also remember the butcher being a constant, but I don't have the greatest memory. I think most people do have that assumption. Diablo 3 complaints. He said,
And I wonder if he's always in the multiplayer.
oh yeah, that's true. That could be the case. Yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, I didn't ask anybody about that on the stream or anything, but that might also be a thing. In single player, maybe he's got that random chance, but then he's always there maybe in multiplayer because
maybe they want people to when they replay single player to have some differences or something.
Yeah.
Diablo 3 complaints. He has 2. I miss being able to play single player, clearing out all enemies in the area. I agree, sir. And then the second one is I miss being able to spam health potions. Yeah, those are good. I agree, Raymond.
Yeah.
Sure mail.
Yeah. Yeah, it changes that changes the dynamic a bit, the health potion spamming.
Yeah.
Right? There's like a cooldown basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
and it makes it a little more methodical and it holds up that sort of pell-mell feeling that the first one has.
Good old cooldowns. The age-old debate. Yep. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it works. I think that's a good point. I think that really works against. I mean, not so much the clearing out because I don't, as somebody who mostly played multiplayer at the time, you were always just jumping in and there was stuff everywhere. But I definitely can see that with the cooldowns. I'd forgotten that was even a thing. But yeah, and you're just sort of like, oh, I guess I'm gonna. Well, hold back a minute. We won't charge into the next room because I've got to wait till my cooldown expires, so we're in good shape for whatever's beyond the next bend. So, a good point. Okay, this one's about Republic Commando. It's from Ben Zog, and I suspect this is because it's a freebie on Games with Gold or Xbox Games with Gold or Live Pass or something, whatever it's called.
Backwards compatible. I don't know if it's. Oh, you think
it's backwards compatible, and I believe it is available. Yeah, if you have Xbox, we heard from Maddie Allen S. Stock. If you have Xbox Live Gold via Twitter, for a short time you can grab Republic Commando for free and play our host game. So it looks like it is a freebie right now on Xbox Live Gold. Anyway, Ben Zaug says, since you both worked on this game, I just wanted to make a couple comments. Oh, here we go. Criticism 15 years on. First, in the opening cinematics, just to get to the gameplay, can we agree no more white screen wipes? Using bright white to change scenes started giving me a migraine. Any design thoughts behind this choice? Second, awesome job allowing the ability to map any input to any button. It's a feature that still isn't used enough in games, and to see here that I could completely remap everything was awesome. Why don't we see this more? Is it difficult to program? Thanks, Ben from Iowa Zog. Yeah, the bright white. I mean, I don't think either one of us can take the blame on that.
Well, I probably can. I think I even have the answer for why we did it. I believe it was to sort of simulate more of a dreamlike state rather than fades to black being more cinematography, more cinematic approach, which is more strict time passing. We were trying to, because it's all in first person and it's sort of like through the life of a clone, through though you are passing time, it was meant to be sort of more, yeah. So it was a creative decision that probably bugs people. We were just trying to be too clever as usual. So totally fine.
That's fine. It never gave me a migraine, so I can't really, yeah. So actually, he says just to get to the gameplay, what's the funny thing about that is the whole reason for this. I don't know. I've never talked about this on the castle. I did talk about it on a stream a long time ago. The reason why that opening cutscene is there at all is because we had to move stuff from the disc, the CD, or DVD, I guess, to the hard drive as part of an install. And that's actually what was going on in the time that you were watching the opening cinematics. That's why they're not skippable, because it would have taken too long. There was a hard limit of like 20 seconds or something that you could have non-interactive content. And so we made that so that we could stream stuff to the hard drive in the background.
Oh wait, are we talking about the same? I was talking about the first person interactive scenes. Are we?
Yeah, no, that's why those are there.
Oh, okay, but they are interactive. I mean, you're in level. You can.
Yes, no, I know they're interactive. No, I just mean that we loaded a minimal amount of data to the hard drive when you put the disk in, like on the main menu or whatever, to load into those scenes. And then while those scenes were there, the rest of the game was streaming to the hard drive.
Yes.
So,
yeah, that's a good tidbit. People, yeah, we're always doing tricks like that to cover stuff up. Yeah.
In fact, the length of that scene, that whole thing, was explicitly determined by me in a meeting with the other engineers and Adam Piper and Jeremy Talbot, who were the sort of art technical directors. And I literally just sat there and was like, oh, how big is this archive? And how big is this archive? And it's how many megabytes, blah, blah, blah. All right. And this is the streaming rate. Zoop. Okay. We need 2 minutes and 22 seconds or whatever, whatever it was. And Piper and Talbot were just like, okay, we're on it. So that's why we have that. It's one of those happy accidents.
It's a good tidbit.
Anyway, second, the mapping inputs.
Did we do that on console?
It's not. Did we do that on console? Yeah, I mean, this is the Xbox version.
Oh, okay, yeah. I had forgotten we did that. That is awesome. Good for us.
So it's not difficult to program. It just takes a little foresight, I think. So typically, if you're just sort of writing your code hard and fast, you'll just be like, oh, well, just tell me when the A button is pressed. And what you need to do in order to plan for this is to write just a little intermediary layer, which is like, I'm going to map when I get this button press, I'm going to send an event that some virtual button is pressed, input X, whatever, fire button, for example. Yeah. And then you just remap what the actual physical buttons are to what the virtual buttons are in that table. That's fairly easy to do, but not once you've written all through your code, polling specifically, for the individual, like, well, what's the value of this stick at this point? You need to plan ahead for that stuff. We did it on I don't know if we did remappings on Starfighter. Oh, we did. We didn't allow you to remap them. We gave you several mappings on the Starfighter games, as I recall.
Often ends up being the solution, yeah. But
yeah,
Brett's right. I mean, it's sort of like, that's why I'm so impressed that we did it it's, in that era, because I feel like that, to your point, that sensibility and approach of being more instance-based and systemic with the way that you guys plan your code out, has become more of the norm. Thinking that through and not making anything hard-coded so much, it seems like is like the much better way to do things. But it takes a long time for people to realize that. And then often what happens is, especially once you're toward the end of the project and you're kind of finalizing this stuff and it's kind of too late or it's too expensive, or it just ends up being scoped out, right? So, it is better to plan for that ahead of time and to set that as a goal so people are right.
Yeah, I mean, even just having to do a menu, though, is might be a lot at the end of a project. Like, oh, man. And those are often tricky, because what if you press the button in two different places? What happens to the old one? Like, does it clear it, or does it fire both? You get into these cases that you have to argue about, and then the testing is a nightmare. So if you haven't scheduled that and fit that in earlier, that is a thing that often gets cut, and that's why you end up with, oh, well, we have remapping features. We're just going to give you several common mappings because that's easy. We can just put a picture on the screen that says this is the mapping, and you just pick which one you want. But one of those interactive menus is a little bit trickier. It was very common, though, already on PC games at the time.
Yeah.
So less so on the consoles. Although I feel like the Xbox had a hardware level remapping, maybe.
Yeah, they might have.
I think they might have, but
Unreal helped us as well.
Yeah, and Unreal helped. Yeah, I'm not sure how much of that we had to code ourselves and how much of it was just using some stuff that was available to us with Unreal. I feel like we had to do a little bit, but not a ton. It's like I said, though, it's not a hard thing to do. It's more just doing it early enough that you don't have to go and try to fix a million places in your code later, because I've had to do that on a project not too long ago. So, and it's no fun. All right. What are we playing for next week, sir?
Well, we're playing through the next 4 levels, which are they called the caves? I don't know what they're called actually.
I don't know what they're called either. I didn't notice because I was too busy trying to fend off monsters.
Yeah, it's essentially the cave section, which should be 4 more levels.
Yeah, 9 through 12.
Yeah, before we get through. 9 through 12 before we get to hell, and and as he enters the at least for the sorcerer, as I entered the cave, he says something about, "Well, it's sure getting hot down here."
Yeah.
Like, really? Yeah. Okay. Just some of the dialogue. We should talk about that next time. Some of the performances are actually, some of them are pretty memorable, I would say, for the time. So yeah.
Yeah, and yes, there's some other stuff too. Also, representation, something to maybe talk about. All right, well, that's a little preview of next week. In the meantime, you can, as I mentioned earlier, shoot the podcast email at devgameclub@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at devgameclub, where I keep an eye on that during the day. You can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
My streaming schedule has been a little erratic this week. Some stuff going on here, but when I am streaming, you can find me at twitch.tv/Brett Duville. If you subscribe, you'll get the notifications. Lately, I've been playing Ni no Kuni on weeknights, and then playing, of course, Diablo on the weekends. Tends to be my schedule. Podcast games on the weekends, and whatever else I feel like playing during the week. All right, well, that's it for us then tonight. Thanks so much for joining us, and good night.
Good night.